and you know all of this, right? It's like painting a picture of possibility,
Yeah.
and that is worth so much value. And so that's why I kind of look at the outcome and the possibility as the number one thing, which will indirectly create value. It's important to take that to the next level. It's not even just the value of what we have, but it's really getting them to paint that future picture, and then using those words and sending them back is going to get you such a higher conversion rate, just by doing that.
So as you can see, I've got someone with me here. I've got Kandis James with me here today. And honestly, Kandis is one of my favorite people, especially when it comes to sales. And so can you come in and just kind of tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah, so I've been in sales of every aspect, honestly, like been there, done that, sold that for about the last 25 years. And so basically, I just help folks who are running their own business, whether it's legal, whether it's accounting, whether it's, art-based entrepreneurship. Basically, I'll just help you really create higher sales conversions through basically a compassion-based selling technique that really allows people to feel comfortable and excited about buying from you.
So I'm so glad to have you here today. Looking forward to this. But Kandis, why don't we start, kind of tell us what you're going to be training us on today.
Yeah, so I mean, just a wee bit of backstory to kind of get where this training comes from. So not only have I been in sales for over 25 years, but my father was in sales for longer than I was alive. By the time he retired, he'd been in sales for longer than that. And he had one of the worst industries, in my opinion, in the world, which was used cars. So there's so many stereotypes that we can put in there. And what happens so when a lot of us start to sell is we get a little bit freaked out and we start to almost like see that other person as interviewing us, and instead of us interviewing them. And so there's kind of like this authoritative battle between salesperson and person being sold to. And so basically what we're going to talk about today are some of the most commonly made mistakes when we get into any type of sales conversations. Some of the language hacks that I use, the top three, I'm going to use a million, but the top three that are really going to help you get through to some of these people that normally wouldn't. And then also, how can we bust objections in a way that makes your client feel good and you feel good and actually gets you the sale.
Awesome. Great. Let's just dive in then. We got a couple of people joining us here slowly and saying hi, but let's dive in and kind of tell us what those issues are.
Yeah. So I would say like the number one mistake that, and I call them mistakes, but they're just things that we do, I think, more naturally when we feel nervous in a sales call, would be feeling like the interviewee instead of the interviewer. And I've got slides that I'll totally pass on to Chris if you want to share them or whatever, but I'm just kind of like glancing over here at what I wrote down. But feeling like the interviewee rather than the interviewer. So oftentimes we feel like if we are in a consult, so somebody has booked a consult with us, it's almost like we have to be interviewed. We have to show them that we are the best, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the opposite. That person has a problem, and at least some part of them believes that you could potentially be the solution. And so when we flip that script and it's like, yeah, maybe I am the solution, but I'm going to ask you questions versus you asking me questions, all of a sudden they start to feel a little bit more seen, right? I think we've all been to places where somebody has tried to sell you something and you're like, I don't want this.
Yeah.
Or like, I'm just not ready for this, or you're not hearing what I'm saying, right? And they'll just try to sell you. And so when you become the interviewer, it's like, yeah, we have what you're saying that you need, but let me make sure first, right? When you flip that context, everything becomes different for that person, as well as how you can conduct that conversation.
Yeah. I love that. That's I saw a training. I think it was Jeremy Rayner. He's kind of big on YouTube, right? But people always are like, "Hey, sell me this pen, sell me this water bottle." And his first question or statement, anytime that happens, he's like, "Well, I don't even know if you need a pen. I don't even know if you need a water. Like, what problems are you facing?" And it goes right back into like, he's like, "I'm not a salesperson. I'm not here to convince you of anything. Like, let's talk about you and your problems." And usually within about 3 minutes, they're begging him to pay money for the water bottle or whatever. But so I love that. That's a really good one. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really important, right? We don't want to sell anything to anybody. We want to sell things to people that we know are going to be our ideal client and that we know that we can actually help. So we need to find that out first. And then using different words than your prospect is a huge mistake. Huge mistake.
Okay.
So they are saying, like, for example, the example I often use is somebody's like, "Oh, well, I need to do this for my family." Or
Yeah.
sorry, opposite. I need to do this for my kids. And then you're like, "Oh, I know this is really important for you to do with your family." Well, kids and family are two very different things, right? We might see like, oh, their kids are their family. But what happens is if they're saying they want to do it for their kids and you say family, I think we all probably have some family member that we're like, oh, I don't like that person.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's at least one family member I think we can all probably muster up. And so when we're saying like family, all of a sudden the subconscious mind directly goes to that family member. I'm not doing it for them. So now you've created a little bit of disconnect between the subconscious mind and where we actually want to get them to go, right? So now they've put up like a little mild fight against what you have to say. So
Yeah.
when we actually use the words, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but like when you actually use the exact words that they're using, the subconscious mind, and I deal a lot with the subconscious mind as far as that, but the subconscious mind will automatically accept it if it's already used those words, right? So the more that you can use the exact, I'm telling you, exact words that they are using, the easier the sale is going to be.
Okay. That's a good one. I had not thought of it that way. That's especially where you say they already accept that. Um, that's good. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, as an NLP trained practitioner, I also use all of that in the sales methodology, right? And so it's really wildly important. And then the last thing is we get too much in the weeds. We start talking about like, on day 3 we're going to offer this, and then someone will contact you on day 7, and then this other thing, and like for these people, they just want the result. you know I often liken it to a show and tell. Like, you are not in kindergarten and you are not on a show and tell. You are not here to say like all of these things are going to happen, because it can overwhelm the mind so quickly. And a lot of the people that you guys are speaking to in law firms, mo on some cases people are coming to you because they're excited about something. In a lot of cases, the reason that someone's contacting a lawyer is because there's a little bit of stress in their life and they need to find a resolution. So if we start giving them an overload of information, what we're actually doing is triggering the fight, flight, freeze mode inside of them. And it's going to make it really hard for them to make a decision.
Yeah.
So opting out of that and really instead just connecting the dots between what do they actually need and what can we offer. And then we can leave all the details to later.
Yeah. Would you say attorneys are better at this or worse at this when it comes to getting in the weeds? I know what my answer is, but I want to hear what you think.
I would, well, I can't speak for all
Yeah.
attorneys, but the attorneys I've worked with really love to get in the weeds.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's something like we've gone to school, we've studied these things, it's such unique, nuanced legal technicalities, and we want to show like how smart we are and how we know these things. And then you start using words like, motion for alternative service or petition, or even things that seem so basic to us, and any of the Latin words that we like to throw out there, and you just watch the people's eyes glaze over.
And as a consumer, I'm like, so do I get the insurance, or do I get this, or do I not? Like, I'm confused now, right?
Yeah.
And confused people do not buy. Overwhelmed people do not buy. They
Yeah.
will not make a decision in that moment. And that's why it's so important. Like, if you're using your like, and everybody does it in every industry, right? You have your industry words.
Yeah.
And those words are your words. Like, you're so close to what you do that it seems normal to you. We need to take a step back and really understand, okay, what does this person actually need? And stop talking in that jargon.
Yeah.
Because you're the I often say, like, people talk themselves out of sales.
Have you helped law firms build sales teams that isn't necessarily the attorney doing all the sales calls?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it
Not
is possible. That's
it is absolutely possible. So,
okay.
yes, I have worked with a law firm that I think you know very well. I don't want to name
Yeah.
names or anything, but
Yeah.
someone that you know very well and like has helped train their sales manager and team, right? So
Yeah.
being able to do that and see an increase in the conversion rates within 90 days was fantastic, right? And so it's not important that the attorney probably shouldn't be there,
Yeah.
you know.
I,
And I used to work for a medical clinic. I know it's not exactly the same, but I'm
similar.
not a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I would do all the sales on the phone,
Yeah.
right? Like I would get them into the office. I would get their appointment booked. I would encourage them to blah, blah, blah. Like, and I know like the main details that I need to know. But I get dropped into people's sales teams all the time.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not the higher up that needs to be doing it. They get way
Yeah.
too involved with it. They get way too intense with it. They go way too in the weeds, and it actually hurts their conversion rate.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to plant that little bug, because I'm guessing that most of the people who are going to be watching this live are going to be the attorneys, probably the law firm owners themselves, right? And they're going to be watching this because they wanted to learn about sales and how they could be better at sales. And I just wanted to plant that little seed to get them thinking that one of the ways of improving the sales, like conversion rates for your company, could very likely be you not being the one doing the sales call, right?
Yeah, get you out of there.
Yeah. And I've done this with a couple attorneys where like even like they'll have like their family law paralegal be the one that's doing the sales calls for family law, and I'll switch it and I'll make the family law paralegal go do the sales calls for the criminal law and the criminal law do the family law, and their conversion rates will go up. Because when you get too much in the weeds, confused mind doesn't buy, and so like because they
Yeah.
don't know the answers, they end up being a lot more compassionate. They focus a lot more on the client's problems, and they close. So I'm planting that little bug there for anybody that's listening, that you may want to consider, especially if you're feeling that you're going into the weeds of having someone else on your team. You can end up having a dedicated sales team if your firm's the right size, but at least consider having someone else on your team. So that's a tangent off of the things you were talking about. I think there's one more element you were talking about, but I wanted to put that out there first.
Yeah, no, and I think that's amazing because really, like some people will say to me, like literally, oh, hey, here's a page of information. Go in there and sell, and I'll sell at like 90% because I'm just like, the number one thing is we have to focus on them, and
Yeah.
that's really where I was going with like the interviewee versus the interviewer, right? People think that I'm being interviewed when actually, no, you're interviewing the client,
Yes.
right? And when you are a little bit too versed in what you do, you can often go a little bit too much in the weeds and screw the whole thing up.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, screw the whole thing up.
Yeah. I agree. 100% agree. Awesome.
Love it.
One more question if you have time, because there's a couple questions here that's about pricing, and I'm going to kind of combine them all together because
Yeah, sure.
inevitably when it comes to legal services, our pricing is kind of high, right? It's not like we're selling $20 widgets. We're selling $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 services sometimes. And so like the question kind of is like, how do you get comfortable or instill confidence to quote these large dollar amounts? Like, how do you sell big, expensive things?
Yeah, I mean, I sell up to like $35,000 offers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is just what it is. But at the end of the day, the more that you understand about the person, and what I say is like instilling possibility. So, what is it that this person, like, how will this person's life change once they've gone through whatever process it is that you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, actually getting clear on that. So, part of the questions that we're asking is like, how will your life change once this has happened, right? And
Yeah.
legal fees are kind of shit in the way that, sorry,
No,
are kind of shit in the way that like people don't want to pay for them
no, they
usually,
don't.
right? But that's why it's even more important that we really build up the possibility of what their life looks like and how it can be after the fact. So, what are their worries right now? How can we make sure that those are gone once we go through that? And then something particularly with pricing is when you're having a conversation with somebody and you've built them up in possibility and you've gotten them to see like, okay, this is all really awesome and so great. And then it's like you say the price. And what I see, this could probably be mistake number 4 that I talked about at the beginning, that it's like you say the price and you automatically start trying to show why it's valid, right? Like,
Yes.
that's because we have this and because we do this and no, just stop, just stop. We've built as long as you've built them up into the possibility and they trust you and they like you and they see what is at the other end of this, you just say the price. And then something we work on in my inside of one of my programs is like we look at like, okay, what is their nonverbal reaction, right? What is their body language? What does their face say? Like if they're like, that's one thing, right?
Mhm.
So, but then we just kind of we let them say their piece. So this is kind of a twofold thing. You just have to be confident. Do you know that you can get them the results?
Yeah.
Um, and if so, speak it confidently. And if not, then you need to kind of just like go back into your realm and see like why are you not confident, right?
Yeah.
But then after that, once you say that price, my favorite thing is to just say the price and wait. I always give space. I give a lot of blank space in sales
Mhm.
calls to let them register. And then once they register, once I see their face, I'm like, okay, well, now that we've talked about the price, what's coming up for you now? So we actually have that conversation head on. And then we talk about finances head on. So we basically create here's what's happening, here's what could happen, and the price is somewhere in the middle. You know, with certain things, like I said, I've sold up to $35,000 offers. And I'll just sit there and like sometimes for the first payment, I will actually encourage them to like sell that old bike they have in the garage. Like, what do you need to do to get here? But we have to have them sold on the outcome first.
Yeah.
And if they are sold on that, then we can work on price. Price isn't, people can find money, people can find time, people can find money and time, right? But those are our two biggest objections.
Yeah. If I could add to what you're saying, it's not about price, it's about value, right? And so if there's ever a price concern, it's because they don't understand the value, right? They don't understand the gap of where they are now to where they want to be, or they don't understand what the pain's costing them. There's lots of different ways of saying that, right? But at the end of the day, they the outcome that they want is worth something to them, whether it's the cost of removing pain or the value of the improvement of their life, whatever that is. And if they understand what that's worth, as long as your price is less than that, they'll buy it. And obviously, the more or less it is, the more willing they are to buy.
Yeah, and I love that, and it's super true. And I mean, I'm weird with certain things. I'm like, no, can't have that, but that, yeah, totally, I'll have that, right?
Yeah.
But I think the reason that I use outcome versus value, and I use them interchangeably also during trainings, but like outcome really is like when we're in a sales conversation, it's really getting them to visualize and feel the outcome.
Yeah.
So, once you buy that house in 1 year from now, can you imagine you guys here? And you're looking out that window and you have your own chickens, so you don't have to buy those stupid overpriced eggs in the store. And
Yeah.
you know what those chickens are getting fed, and you know all of this, right? It's like painting a picture of possibility.
Yeah.
And that is worth so much value. And so that's why I kind of look at the outcome and the possibility as the number one thing, which will indirectly create value, right? So looking at that house, and I'm sure the reason that your wife was so keen on it, because she could probably see the garden outside and the this over there, right? But it's like getting people to verbalize that and actually exchange that with you, because then you can use those words and you can bring them back to them.
Yeah.
So it's important to take that to the next level. It's not even just the value of what we have, but it's really getting them to paint that future picture. And then using those words and sending them back is going to get you such a higher conversion rate, just by doing that.
Yeah. That's gold, because it's not, again, rewatch that and listen to that right there, because by painting the future, you're not only getting like the immediate value, but you can compound that over the next year, 2, 10, which makes that gap so much bigger, right? Like if something's worth $100,000 and it only costs 10, people will do it every time, right? Now, if it's $15,000 and it costs 10, they should still do it, but they're going to be a lot less motivating the bigger the difference. And by focusing on, like you said, the outcome and the long-term feelings there, you can turn something that was worth 15 into 100, and they're only more likely to buy. So that's a really good way of wording it. I hadn't really worded it that way before or thought of it that way. So that's super helpful. That's awesome. So, well, thank you, Kandis. That's some really good advice for people.